Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Where Work Meets Life. I'm Dr. Laura, and I'm delighted to bring you an episode about evolving leadership in these evocative times. Wisdom from the queer community with Dr. Joel Davis Brown, a transformational leadership expert, author, and coach. Let me tell you a little bit about Joel. I am so honored that our paths connected. We're definitely kindred spirits in the way we look at the leadership situation in the world around us, the crisis that is going on when it comes to many leadership challenges. And what Dr. Joel Davis Brown brings is he is the Chief Visionary Officer of Pneumos, LLC, a management consulting firm based in San Francisco, which is where he is today. He has nearly 25 years of consulting experience, so similar to me, and he's helped develop leaders and worked with professionals across 5 continents, and he focuses on many organizations, including Fortune 500 companies. He's worked with Apple, LinkedIn, the United Nations, so he's had a lot of really great experience. He holds a Juris Doctor, so he's a lawyer by background from the University of Virginia, and a doctorate in educational leadership, also from California. He's a globally recognized thought leader, and he's known for his creativity, humor, and ability to build community. He spends his time between the Bay Area and New York City, and I'm super excited that he sent me his award-winning and best-selling book. I'm holding it up for those of you on YouTube, The Souls of Queer Folk, How Understanding LGBTQ plus culture can transform your leadership practice. Welcome to the show, Joel.
Thank you. You made me blush as you were reading. It's hard to see that, but thank you for the warm welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it is my absolute pleasure. And beyond that bio, I want to know more about the real Joel, just a little bit more about who you are and what you feel your purpose is in this tricky but beautiful world.
Excellent question. Who am I? I'm heart centered. I'm heart forward, which means that I lead with my heart. I connect with my heart. Those are the things that, in the ways in which I love to navigate the world. I'm an artist. I'm a person who seeks and thrives in community and has community all around the world. So there are a number of places around the world that I call home. I'm a person who loves nature. I tease my students. I say I'm equal parts nerd, muse, jock, and geek. And I'm someone who loves story and someone who is very, very much fascinated by and curious about the world that's around us. So that's a little bit about who I am.
You know what? When you said that, that all resonated for me. That could be my intro. So thank you.
We're definitely kindred spirits. I can definitely tell that. So there's no surprise.
Well, we are, and I have this beautiful rose quartz with me right now because I'm very heart-centered too and really focused on unconditional love and leading with my heart. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Tell us a bit more about your book, The Souls of Queer Folk. What's it about? Who's it for? And what inspired you to write it?
Thank you. It's for everyone. And what I would say by that is it can be read at different levels. So a little bit of background. When I first started thinking about and writing the book, we live in an era right now, frankly, where there are a lot of people in the world who want to tell queer people what it means to be queer. And a lot of those associations and a lot of that information is very negative and pejorative and stereotypical. So I decided a long time ago, it seems like a long time ago, that I really wanted to uncover what it means to be queer from a ethnographic standpoint. And that may seem like a very simple or straightforward process, but it's an important one because to inquire as to what makes a community who they are, you have to understand and have to validate that very community. And that's something that has been present not only in research, but in sociology and also just in our socio-political discourse. So even to do that is a validating, life-affirming thing for people in the community. As I did so, there were some answers that came forth that were not fairly surprising, but were very compelling. in terms of what were the values of the community? Why do people, um, what do people find that is important? What are they searching for? What does it mean to be part of this very vibrant, rich, complex, and diverse community? But then a fascinating thing happened. And I'm sure for those of us who've written books, you start out thinking you're going to write one book and you end up writing something different. When I looked at what the values were of the community, I realized that a lot of what people are seeking in terms of modern leadership are things that the queer community naturally embodies. And so then I started to think, okay, the book now has much bigger import. This is not just to help queer people and our allies understand, well, what is this community like and what do we stand for? Being one of the emerging and more visible communities across the world and the planet. There also in the book and in the study of the queer community is a prescription of how we can live in these, as you call them, these evocative times. We live in a world right now that social scientists have called VUCA. Now, for those who hear that, that's not a new strain of COVID. VUCA means volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That's the world that we're living in. And from what we hear from social scientists, this is the world that we're going to be living in until the earth ceases to exist. So the opportunity for us as human beings and as a species is to figure out how do we navigate these very things, these dynamics where there's competition for resources, there's uncertainty or the lack of predictability as to how things are going to happen. There's this complexity in terms of how you do simple things, and there's an inability to make or come to clear, coherent conclusions about what exactly we may see. And guess who has experience dealing with that? The queer community, because of repression or oppression, because of bias, because of discrimination. We have had to navigate these perils, this dynamic, this VUCA system, even before it was called VUCA, for probably most of the human existence. And not only have we been able to do it and survive, but we've been able to thrive. So if I were a person outside the community and certainly being a person within the community, and I see a group that has overcome, not so much overcome, but in some cases, yes, overcome, navigated, negotiated many of these things that are plaguing our societies right now in a different form, albeit, and they're doing well, they're thriving. I would want to know what is that? What is the antidote? What is it that they possess, they know, that they have learned that I can bottle up and then apply it to myself. So that's where the leadership context comes in. And I think it's important as we talk about leadership because a number of people will hear this, or I've tried to introduce my book to people and they'll say, oh, this is a business book. And I say, no, leadership is a life book. It's not a business book. So leadership applies to how you lead yourself, how you interact and engage with your family, your spouse, your children, your community, and yes, with the world. And so in that space, I think there's an opportunity for people to learn and to benefit from the wisdom of the queer community to say, how can I be better as an individual? How can I be a better version of myself? How can I have a better relationship with my family? How can I support my organization? And also, how can we create a better planet? So that's in essence what this book is about. And it wasn't, again, something that I anticipated, but it was something that I was glad to discover. As a researcher, you don't go in coming to any preconceived notions or conclusions. You go in thinking, I'm just going to set a sail, leave the shore and set sail and see what I find. And what I found was much bigger than what I thought I could. So, yes, you could read it from the standpoint of, I want to understand more about the queer community. But I think the next level is to say, like all communities, this community, which is comprised of women and people who are gender nonconforming and all nationalities and people from every racial and ethnic background, people who have disabilities and people who don't have disabilities, people who have non-visible disabilities, people from different religious and spiritual contexts, very heterogeneous group. What can we learn from this group that will help us to be better people? And so that's the opportunity that the book prevents or provides for anyone who happens to read it.
Wow, thank you for sharing that and the why behind this beautiful and important book. And I just want to say, I'm sorry what's been happening to your community in terms of this shift in society. And I feel like it's almost sliding back in time with the progress that's been made in these past decades. And I feel like the shift is happening to many diverse groups, including women and women's rights. And I just feel it's heading into some darker times, but where there's dark, light will shine. And it's people like you and I who will make a difference. But thank you. And I'm sorry for what your community is going through, Joel. How is that for you?
I really appreciate you saying that. It's a second by second, minute by minute, day by day struggle. Uh, there are days, particularly at the beginning of the year, right after the inauguration here in the States, there were moments of despair, depression, disorientation, anxiety, anger, rage. I remember being in the gym for, because I go to the gym regularly, so going for about a month. And there was a period there where every time I went out the house, or I was in the gym, where I hear all sorts of conversations, I was thinking, who voted for whom? What did you think about this? And who are you supporting? And then I had to realize that's not who I am. And I lead with love. And so that's the first battle, right? To make sure that you don't become co opted and corrupted into something that you're not. And I think as students of history, we also have to remember too that these things have happened before. This is cyclical. And so I almost could have predicted, particularly after 2016, that we'd be in this period. And actually, at least in the States, 100 years ago, we had a similar period. That was a time where there was the rise of eugenics and the idea that certain traits and characteristics were genetic and that there were certain races that were quote unquote superior and some were inferior. And there was a lot of study by the Nazis as to what was happening in the United States back in the 1910s and the 1920s. That is not to say that we need to go back to that, that we need to stay in that period or that morass, but just to help us understand that just as we came through it before, we will come through it again if we pay attention to the lessons, if we bring people and communities together, and if we find a resolve, which again is a question, a matter of leadership.
Absolutely. So, I want to know about the 9 queer leadership principles. I don't need to hear all 9, but what ones rise to the top as most important and provocative and compelling that we need leadership to embrace to address the leadership crisis that we're in?
Yeah, so the one that immediately comes to mind is justice. And justice encompasses a sense of activism, a sense of global awareness, a sense of um, leadership, courage. So, justice is definitely one. I think authenticity, which is to speak with clarity and to use one singular voice and not try to be or emulate someone else, which at this time can be difficult because there's this need or this pressure to conform. One that doesn't get talked about a lot, verve. And so, what do we mean when we say verve? Verve is this living life to the fullest, having zest and energy and flair, being irrepressible. If you know the French language or you're francophone, je ne sais quoi, it's that element of I'm going to be my best self and the joie de vivre, finding joy and gratitude in day to day living. So those are just a few of the leadership principles that I think are important, that I think right now are definitely implicated. If we look at Verve, for example, how do we find inspiration? How do we look at the world and not just see the negative things, but also see the positive things? Because as we see darkness and we see a number of the things that are radiating from a lot of autocratic places, not just what's happening in Washington, D.C., but what's happening in places, for example, like Beijing, or what might be seen in places such as Budapest or in Moscow or in smaller enclaves around the world. How do we make sure that we also recognize that there is resistance, there's protest, there are people who are not yielding to that energy and recognize that that energy, that presence is just as real and just as potent as what's happening on in the political or more visible scale. So having that joy and cultivating that joy every single day, because when you have joy, therefore you have hope. When you have hope, then you have reason to act. When you don't have hope and you don't have joy, then there's a learned helplessness. And I've seen some of that take place and take root here. In terms of the authenticity, finding your voice, and that means thinking independently, being critical, realizing that your way of leading, standing up is okay, and that you don't have to lead like everybody else. In fact, we don't. I've seen a lot of people make this comment or this appeal: "Where's our leader?" And the leader is you, right? We don't need to have a savior. We're not going to have a savior. The savior is each one of us marching together in unison at different places around the earth, but marching to the collective center where we meet and we can bring our powers and skill sets to bear to work collaboratively together. And then in terms of justice, in activism, what I talk about in the book is the need to be activated. So, a lot of activism, I think, particularly in the last 25 to 30 years, I think it's become very corporatized. And what I mean by that is people seem to think that activism only can happen if somebody's funding you, if someone gives you permission, if someone tells you that, um, I guess, says to you, this is the time. Like there's this attitude of, we now say we're going to endorse you or say that you may do these very things or that it's going to be comfortable. And that's not how activism works. And so, but the first thing that has to happen before we try to connect and influence other people, which is what activism is to activate ourselves, to not be complacent, to not be seduced into thinking because I can watch movies, I can go out, I can still shop, I can still go out to a fancy restaurant, that there's not a need for us to coalesce and to address some of the larger social ills that are taking place because it's easy to become seduced by our comfort. So those are things that I think are really resonant right now, in addition to other things such as resilience, interconnectedness that we can talk about more. So I'm finding that on a given day, again, any one of the nine leadership competencies, queer leadership competencies, are things that I'm drawing upon. And oftentimes it's not a matter of doing something new. It's about remembering something I've done before and applying it to the current time. And so sometimes leadership is not about us having to acquire a new skill set. It's about remembering who we were before we forgot who we were. And that's the opportunity for us right now, is to remember who we were and who we are so that we don't have to allow things as they are to continue to settle and to materialize and to manifest in the way that they're going.
Wow, you just covered a lot of territory right there. A lot of great, really great points. What struck me is the whole verve and finding the joy. And I see a lot of people spiraling into negative mindsets and looping negative thoughts because of all this fear around us. And I'm always talking about gratitude on a daily basis. And you really exemplified that, Joel, in terms of what can I be grateful for, and coming forward each day with joy and instilling hope in others. And I think that's really important in these difficult times.
I think so too, because there's a difference between gratitude and toxic positivity. So toxic positivity is the insistence that a person always must act or behave in a certain way that's celebratory, that's positive, even when things or situations are dire. And that's different. So toxic positivity might be, well, at least, yes, I know things are not looking great, but at least you're not a jailed political dissident. Well, I know that things are bad, but at least you have food on the table. There's a difference between that type of energy, which robs people of their humanity, which suppresses emotions, which denies people their very existence and their story, and helping people to see and operate with balance. And that's what gratitude allows me to do. So, other people, it may be something different, but it allows me to recognize that no narrative, no single narrative need to cloud my view of the world. Yes, there might be things that are happening that are negative, hurtful, and harmful. And the fact that I can see them as being harmful and negative and intrusive is in itself something I should be grateful for, that I still have the consciousness and my soul is still alive to recognize that these things are not good, and that there are a number of other people who see this as well. And we're all fighting to make sure that we have and retain our humanity. So that's what I mean by that. You can't, when your battery is empty, when your cup is empty and it's not full, it becomes hard then to act in any type of proactive way. So those are the things that's part of my wellness ritual that I've cultivated for myself. And again, what I share in the book, what I share here are things I also have to remind myself of too, because again, leadership is not something that only certain people do. It's an opportunity for all of us to again rise to the level or rise to the occasion and rise to a certain level to be better than we were yesterday.
Absolutely. Really, really well put. And I feel like there's a lot of dualistic thinking in terms of me versus you and us versus them. And I feel that we need to realize that we're all connected as a human race and that this dualistic fear-based thinking, that's what's causing a lot of the problems in the world. I think judgment, closed-mindedness, fear, competition. Would you agree?
I do. And I think that's part of why this book, at least in my mind, has universal appeal and there's a universal invitation. Because what I say to people is whether you choose to acknowledge it or not, you're in a relationship with me. You are bounded with me. You are bounded, yes, with this uh, gay, black, working class, non Christian, self identified male from the global north just like I am now bounded and I am bounded with you. And so, what does that mean for us? That means that as we entertain this relationship, we have to understand what is it there for me to learn. And so, when we are making contact and communing and talking with and dialoguing with people, the opportunity in those interactions is to say, what can I learn about myself? And so, in the interaction, when I'm talking to someone who's vastly different than me, at least on the outside, at least from these based on diversity identifiers, what is it that you're supposed to learn about yourself? What is that your fear is telling you? What is it that your perhaps your anger, your joy, your affinity, what does that tell you? The same thing with me. And that's the opportunity for me and us to learn, to grow, to heal, and to move in a different direction. So I definitely think there is a tendency right now to not only be dualistic, but to be very simplistic, to be non-contextual, to try to reduce things to sound bites and to try to reduce people to simple things. And I think we have to be more courageous and more thoughtful than that and figure out how do we get beyond this. And there will be some conversations that can't be had because maybe I'm not the right person. Maybe I'm not the person who can have a conversation with a certain individual or in a certain context. But there is an opportunity at some point, I think, for all people to have conversations and to say, how can we be better? What is it that is our common purpose and what are we here to do? And guess what? That conversation is going to endure whether we choose to have it or we don't. So we may as well get on with the business of figuring out what is it that we can do better together because we see the results of our collective actions and our consciousness is what the world has produced. And one of the things that um, concerns me and makes me sad is all the human capital that we have wasted dealing with things such as ism. And you can add whatever prefix you want to that when we talk about sexism and racism and heterosexism. Think about where our species would be if we simply stopped thinking about how you're different or these ideas that somehow I'm better, you're better, I'm worse, you're worse. And we actually thought about how we could move the world forward. That's the thing that I think about when I'm in cities, when I'm walking around the earth, is when I'm traveling and I'm walking in different neighborhoods, I should say, and how much time we've wasted, and what is going to be the wake up call? Is it going to be climate change? Is it going to be boiling oceans? Is it going to be COVID? There's some tests that we've had that I don't think we've passed.
War?
War, yeah, no, absolutely. War. I mean, the list goes on, right? So I don't know. So all I can do then from an individual standpoint is say, am I being the best person and what does that look like? And how do I pull myself back to make sure that I'm living up to my values, which again is the foundation of leadership, which then allows me to interact interpersonally, organizationally, and then globally. But it all starts with self. And that's what this book really speaks to is the queer experience. When we talk about going in the closet or coming out of the closet, what you're speaking to or what we're talking about is first having gone into a cocoon, into a space where you have to deeply look at yourself. And when you are coming out as a queer person, you have to face parts of yourself that may not be expected parts of yourself that may not be accepted, parts of yourself that you may have rejected, and say, I have got to deal with that in order to be a better person. So even just in the queer experience of going into the being in the closet, but then coming out, emerging, but having gone through the crucible and gone through the process of saying, I want to be somebody different, I have to face myself, is something that I think all leaders should do. And I think those leaders who have healed themselves, or at least in the process of trying to heal themselves, can actually do the transformational work. And that doesn't mean that we have to be perfect, because I'm not perfect, but it does mean that I'm less likely to create harm, or if I do create harm, I'm more likely to recognize the impact and to try to remedy that than if I go through life um, blindly, ignorantly, with a sense of obliviousness, with no attention to what my intent is and what impact I'm creating in the world. That starts from having an internal conversation and introspection to say, what is it and who is it that I am and what is it I want to be, which innately, by virtue of our journey, all queer people who have come out have had to do and continue to do, because there's this dual consciousness between who was I supposed to be, but who am I actually in this life, and reconciling those two and then saying, how do I move forward with that?
And we're all on a process of healing our core wounds, and we all have wounds from childhood experiences, but I'd say the queer community has more than its fair share of having to hide identity, come to peace with identity, share identity, and face, more judgment and persecution than anyone deserves. So you say that really, really well. I feel like I didn't summarize that very well, but you know what I meant. It's pure. It's pure-hearted. And with that, I believe that we are all interconnected. I believe in soul, and the soul that is part of each of us. And I want to talk a little bit about that, how we can integrate soul more into leadership and workplaces. What's your thought on that, opinions on that?
Integrating soul, that's a question I've not been asked before, and I love it. So let me just sit with that for a little bit. How do we integrate soul? When I hear soul, what I'm hearing is that part of ourselves that no matter what the world has said or done is undisturbed. It's the true essence of who we are. It is the composite of our values and our personality and our persona and our purpose, right? So, how do we do that? And I think the first thing is having time for guidance, direction, and focus. So, we live in an era and in a society, and I'm just as guilty of this as anybody else, where there's always something that's calling our attention. It's a beeping thing, television, news, breaking news, the alert, the hot take. So I think the first thing that has to happen for us to bring our souls into our leadership practice is to give ourselves space to be clear as to who we are, and to understand what is our purpose, what are our values, what are we here to do, and to not deviate from that. So, I, for example, have a list of my core values. My core values are, and I hope I can remember them: community, passion, adventure, freedom, and creativity. So, one of the things I do that I learned in my 20s is whenever I'm entering into a new experience, so when I was single and I was dating, or when I was looking at jobs, even friendships or communities or places I wanted to go and experiences I wanted to have, I would say to myself, how many of my values are going to be present in this experience? How many of my values are going to be implicated by my relationship with this person? Am I going to be able to explore and have these things? Now, there is something to be said about meeting new people and being having uh, broadening your perspective and not just being stuck. So I'm not saying that you should just stay doing the same things over and over again, but it also means though, in terms of your leadership, you don't want to leave those things behind. You can certainly venture off and try new things, but if you forget who you are at your core, your foundation, then you're going to be rudderless. That's when you see leaders who are moving in directions that don't align with their purpose and their values. So I think the first thing is giving ourselves clarity, time, guidance, and focus to say, who are we? I think the second piece is to heal, which means to let go of the stories that we've told ourselves that have been told about us that no longer serve us. And so, one of the things we have to ask ourselves is, what are the stories that we need to release? Maybe it's a parent's judgment. Maybe it's society's idea of what our role should be. Maybe it's the harsh criticism that you got from a job or an employer or a manager. Letting go of those stories to reveal who you truly are, and then giving yourself permission. And so I grew up in the Midwest, which is probably of the United States, which is probably not too different from Calgary, which, I come from a place where you're told not to stand out too much, not to speak out, to keep yourself humble, which I do as a Midwesterner appreciate a sense of humility. But we have to remember and think about and discern, is humility, is it really about humility, or is it about keeping me in a prison? Is it really about me not putting myself above the group, or is it about keeping me down beneath a structure, a system, and ideology that doesn't serve me? So those are the things that allow the soul to emerge in the leadership where you can be yourself. And again, there's a difference between asking people to change and asking people to be a better version of themselves. And I've worked with people and they'll say sometimes, "You want me to be somebody different?" I'm saying, "No, I'm not asking you to be somebody different. I'm asking you to be the better version of yourself," which means growth, which means evolution, which means stepping outside of your comfort zone and being different. So I think those three things, you know, giving oneself permission, healing, but then also allowing for guidance, direction, and focus, which can only be accomplished through stillness and quiet and reflection, is the way that we bring our souls to bear so that when you're leading, you're not just imitating Steve. I remember going to a consulting gathering, and there was this multi-million dollar consultant who was going to tell everybody how to grow their business into seven figures. And his name was, for the purposes of this conversation, Steve. And after 30 minutes, almost everybody in this group was acting like Steve. They were talking like Steve. They were walking like Steve. They were cracking the same jokes as Steve. And I thought, I think we missed a point. The point is not to be Steve, it's to be the best version of you. So recognizing too that as you become this soulful leader, it's not going to be you acting like Dr. Joel. It's not going to be you acting like Dr. Laura. It's going to be you acting like the best and highest version of yourself, which may appeal to some people and it may not to be. But in you being who you need to be, you will attract and draw forth the experiences of people, the places that you need to have the impact that you want and to live the purpose or to affect the purpose that you're brought here on earth to do. So that's how I think about soulful leadership, which to me is getting to the essence of who you are.
I love it. And I think you nailed it. We need more space and time and quiet to listen to the whispers of our soul and our purpose and to trust our intuition. Because what's happening is we're moving so quickly and we're bombarded with information and we're not listening to the inner standing that we have within, not understanding, inner standing, because we all have an inner essence, like you said, and an inner voice. And the problem with society is it's like, I'm just having an image of a foghorn, just like being yelled at and over, and all these messages and media and news. And we're told what we must be and what we must seek and the continuous achievement and the financial gain, etc., rather than what do I want to bring to this world today and how can I be better today than I was yesterday. And I think that shoving certain values down everyone's throats is not the way to go, because we need the diversity, we need the views of every diverse group, including the queer community, including women, including all different ethnicities. And I see so much in common across the world. When you look into someone's eyes, you can really tell if they have a pure heart, and you can really notice a lot of similarities in values across the world. I'm wondering if you noticed that too, Joel, in all your travels.
I do. I'm going to share a quick story with my late father. I've had the privilege now, which still seems far-fetched to me, that I've been in over 100 countries. I teach overseas. I studied overseas. I'm thinking about living overseas, and I've visited a number of places. And I remember my father said to me, he was a conservative Christian, and he said, the Bible says your purpose is to know God, not to travel the world. And I said, but in traveling the world is how I know God, right? So when I meet people, and I know that when people tell you that they travel, the instant reaction or thought might be, oh, they just want to impress people and have pictures to post on social media. And for me, it's not that. It's really, for me, part of my education. So when I go to different countries, it's part of me learning more about myself. We talked earlier about making contact with people and what that reveals about who you are and where you need to grow, and how you might reinforce things about yourself that perhaps are you're not sure about. It's all about my education. So that's part of why I love travel, is because I learned something new about myself. I look at the people I meet as my teachers. I look at the experiences as something that will help me learn something different. And I remember having worked in Finland and saying, okay, if I'm going to fly to Finland, which is a long ways away, I need to see other things. And there's this big country that's right next to Finland. I thought, I can't go to Russia. But it was the fear that said to me, that's probably why you need to go. So I ended up getting a visa. Surprisingly, at that time, it was very easy to get into Russia. You could get a 72-hour visa to go to St. Petersburg if you're coming from either Helsinki, Copenhagen, or Stockholm. And I went in and loved it and learned so much about how all people can be programmed, and how ultimately all people are the same and people want the same things, and that there was no difference. I remember being in St. Petersburg and seeing people on the street, and they had, I was with one group, and they had a lady, had her hair was colored pink, and they were out drinking and dancing. I thought, and this was honestly my reaction. Oh, so Russians actually do party. So they don't walk around like robots and talk in this robotic tone, and they can do fun and frivolous things just like people might do in San Francisco, right? And it again reinforced the lesson that um, this is an opportunity for me to let go of my own programming and to let go of my own ideas of separation, which have been built up over decades of growing up during the Cold War and hearing all these horrible stories about Russians and the Soviet Union and Gorbachev and whatnot until the Berlin Wall came down, and to let that go. And so when I do travel, what I love is, and that is my favorite part of traveling, is not visiting historical sites, not eating the food, it is meeting people and building relationship and learning from them, their story, and also learning how I can become better as a person by engaging with them and letting go of my assumptions, my biases, and my stereotypes as well.
Beautiful. I feel the exact same. We are kindred spirits. That's exactly why I love the traveling and the adventure and meeting all kinds of interesting souls who have more in common than they do differences in a lot of cases. So, what do you read or listen to for your own growth and development? Because you seem like an avid learner who's on a real adventure.
I'm going to tell myself here, I'm not reading a lot right now because I'm writing. So I'm working on my next book. So I'm trying to make sure I don't bring another voice into my writing, but um, it could, um, it could range from anything. I mean, I have a ton of books, some of which I actually need to attend to, but it could be something spiritual, it could be science fiction, it could be articles from around the world. So I'm always reading. I think the thing that I'm most focused on right now is rest. It is most focused on self care. It is recognizing I don't have to do something, right? So again, I said earlier, I grew up in the Midwest, and so I used to say stuff like, "Oh, what did you do this weekend, Joel?" "Oh, I was lazy." So now I changed that statement. Now I was being restorative. I was taking care of myself. I was getting much needed rest and relaxation. So that's what I'm focused on. But I'm trying to read more fun stuff now. But I'm also, because of the era we're in, I'm paying attention to the activists, the healers, the workers of yesteryear who went through similar times. So whether that's someone like Apollo Freire, whether it's someone like Anne Frank, whether it's people from long ago who dealt with similar circumstances, I'm looking for keys to how to deal with, thwart, and push back against some of the ideas and the behaviors that we're seeing right now. So it's a balance between something fun and light. Nothing, I'm not reading any type of trashy novel. I love science fiction. So science fiction, although right now it feels a little bit like Star Wars and science fiction, but then also then things that are going to be restorative and spiritually based, then also things that are going to be reminders of or lessons from yesteryear about how to deal with um, autocratic governments or to deal with repression. So it's a mix and blend of all those things.
Powerful. Very, very powerful. What's your next book about?
Healing.
Okay.
Yeah, healing. So it's a different process writing this book. And one that I didn't think would be as, I won't say choppy, but just kind of a slow grind, um, because it's really getting into the heart. And I'm using a lot of personal story and narrative to talk about my own healing journey. So that's the next book. So my goal, soft goal, is to have it wrapped up probably by September, October, at least the first draft, and have it ready by the end of the year.
I cannot wait to discuss that one with you. Powerful. Thank you. If you could have one wish for a better world of work, what would it be?
I would love for there to be more humanity in how we look at work. I would love for it to be more of a heart-based approach and not just a academic, mental, cerebral approach to work. That's how I'd like to look at it. I would also like there to be more play. Adults learn best when they're having fun. There are studies that have demonstrated that and show that. And I think bringing that balance of heart and humanity, but also the fun and the playfulness, I would love to see more of that brought into the mix for work in organizations and how we train, coach, and consult with our clients and with our partners throughout the world.
Beautiful. So, thank you very much for this conversation. I feel we could go on for a lot longer, but we also have touched some key points about how to evolve leadership in these evocative, uncertain, VUCA type times. And there's so much wisdom to be learned from the queer community. So, thank you for writing this powerful and important book and sharing these wisdoms globally, Joel.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me, and thank you for your presence and your work. It gives me hope and it gives me inspiration as well. And to all of those out there who are doing similar things, please keep going, because even if it doesn't feel like anybody notices, we all are taking notice and we all need you to be your best and brightest self.
Thank you. Well put. And I really hope we stay in touch and you stay well, Joel.
Absolutely.
Thank you for tuning into Where Work Meets Life. If you found this content valuable, please rate, review, and share with others who may benefit. If you're struggling in your work life and need support, I offer coaching sessions. You can book a complimentary consult on my website. I'm also a passionate keynote speaker and would love to discuss your professional speaking needs. Visit my website, drlaura.live, to sign up for my monthly e-newsletter filled with tips and resources to help you stay well.